I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The IntelleXual Podcast starts now.
I guess I've lived in Vegas so long that it's like, is it comp? All right, I'll go. Then you still end up, because then you end up over tipping anyways, and then you say, hey, I drink for free, but then you're like, how the hell did I go through $300? You're like, oh yeah, because I was playing video poker trying to.
Well, that's the key in Vegas, right? Like everything's comped so that you spend everything in the slot machines.
Yeah.
Where you end up spending way more than you would have otherwise.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm just like, shit, I should have just paid for each drink, even at the full price. I
just bought every drink. I'd only spent a tenth of what I spent on the floor.
Yeah. But then again, then sometimes you walk away, you're like, holy shit, I'm up $2,000. Like, how'd that happen? Yeah, so I don't know. It's
just enough that just a taste.
Yeah. Man, just enough to keep you coming back.
Well, Whitney, do you want to introduce our guest?
And, absolutely. Sure. So
tell
today,
everybody who we're talking to.
Yeah. So today we are talking to Paul Vato. Paul is an actor and improviser from Chicago, but currently residing in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we met Paul via the lovely app Clubhouse. Paul is quite gregarious. And we're like, you know what, dude, you have to come on our show because you're a fun guy. Paul, you want to go ahead and say hi?
Hi. Wouldn't it be if I was like the worst interview ever and then just like, yep. Okay.
I've been down that road.
Have you?
No, the most common thing when we ask people to come on the show is they're like, how long does your show usually go? And I say, anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour, and people panic. Oh, I don't know that I have enough to talk about for that long. I go, yeah, you do. Everybody.
I'm starting to panic because I'm like, wait, is that going to be enough?
There you go. Yeah, you are always on Clubhouse talking.
Thanks, David.
Paul's a talker.
Paul is a talker.
I think it's been, a full year of pent up, just being shut up for a full year and just texting people. It took me a little bit to get back in the groove of actually talking, and I'm still sometimes stumbling over my words. And but it's just, this Clubhouse really has been life-changing. And I'm like, who doesn't like to talk? But I get it. There are people that don't like to talk. But for me, it's right up my alley, whether it's doing, meeting people like you and Whitney, and then getting interviewed, which is great because, if I can later on, I'll tell you about my podcast that's coming out, and then also on the other hand, me doing the interviewing, especially on Clubhouse. And I almost treat them, I keep saying shows or events because I think I miss, the theater so much that it's like,
right.
Welcome to my show. They're like, it's just a Clubhouse room. Like, what are you talking about?
I keep calling it panels, but I've worked in the corporate audiovisual field for so long doing conventions, and I go to Comic-Con all the time. So it just feels like that to me. Like,
it's so funny. You can tell our backgrounds because I keep saying symposiums, which is very teachery of me,
All right. Why? Because you're fancier than we are?
She is fancier. She's got a master's degree and everything.
I'm going to start calling them symposiums. How dare you? I'm like, welcome to my show. And then at least, what do you call it, David?
Panels. Yeah, panels.
Fancier, but then Whitney over here is like, welcome.
Symposium. It's like 4 syllables.
Yeah.
I love my $10 words.
Paul, kudos to you for calling her out. I love it. Welcome to the show.
Oh man, this is gonna be great. So Paul, all right, let's get started. Let's dig in. You're from Chicago originally, right?
Yes, that is correct. Well, once again, here we go. Let me clarify that, because then people from the actual city will be like, what a poser.
You're from the surrounding area.
I'm from Aurora, Illinois, which
there
is
you go.
Of Chicago, and people mostly know it for Wayne's World.
Yep.
All right. I'm from St. Louis, well, outside of St. Louis, so I know where Aurora is.
I gotta go. Forget it. This How dare you? And your blues or Jazz or whatever your hockey team is called.
It's the Blues, and they've been killing it.
She just had to share her misery with you. That's all.
But I mean, I've only gone to like one hockey game ever. I'm really more of a baseball fan, so I have to ask, who is your team? Cubs.
Cubbies.
Oh.
Yeah, that's America's team. Now, of course, if the Sox are playing somebody else, then yes, of course, I'm going to root for the Sox because it's still Chicago. But I'm sorry, I meant to say Chicago. From Chicago, where we don't got no accent, so that's where I'm from. And but so yeah, I'll go for the Sox. But the Cubbies, and then when I studied improv, which I'm maybe jumping the gun here, I studied at Improv Olympic, which is catty corner to Wrigley, so Clark and Addison. So I spent a lot of time there, and actually lived right up the street from Wrigleyville for a very short time right before I moved to LA. Lived above a restaurant, and the parking. I could park there for free unless there was a Cubs game. Then I knew I had to go move it. But I get woken up by I don't know if he was Latino or Greek, but all he was. I think he was probably the owner of the restaurant. Like never worked, just on days when he could go collect cash from the parking. And it was a parky. I got to go move my car because I'm not going to pay him $20 just to park here. But it was still early, so I go move my car, and I got to park for free the rest of the week, so I didn't care.
That's one of the cool things about like Chicago and New York, like those kind of older cities, as opposed to like Los Angeles, is the like characters. There's like characters all over, and the cities have character because of the characters, right?
Yes, 100%. Even the sign at that restaurant proclaimed, "We have the best tacos in town." TAWN. So we'd always go like, "Hey, these guys have the best tacos in town."
It's too funny.
I'm Latino, so I can say that. So how dare you laugh at that, David?
Hey, I'm half Filipino, like
Close enough.
And 50% of my Filipino side is in fact pure blood Spanish.
Of course it is, because you know what they did.
Yeah, I know what they did. I do know what they did.
So, Paul, I'm curious. So you said you grew up in Aurora.
Yes.
Were you always into the arts? Like, did you do theater growing up, or when did this spark happen?
No, because that's not something that's, and not to stereotype, but at least when I was growing up, it wasn't like a very Latino thing. Like, hey, my son's doing, theater. No, not at all. And it wasn't something, I think I was funny, and I was heavy. So I think maybe the two went together. Maybe it was, even to this day, maybe a form of, just trying to get by and not be, let me make fun of me first before anyone else does. And then whatever.
It's protectionism.
No, to theater at all. Like it was school, because my father was from Mexico, my mom from Texas, but her parents, also Mexican. So it was kind of like I was first and a half generation. And the priority was not doing theater or, no, I'm sorry, that kind of came out a little theater, but it was, it was learning. It was going to school. And even now, I feel like a lot of times the arts are not as important until right now, when NFT has come into play. Now it's like, oh my God, I got to start creating art, but for different reasons. So no, I was, I went to parochial. I had it very tough. I was in parochial school. I did 12 years. I was on the inside for 12 years of parochial school.
You only do 2 days, the day you go in and the day you come out.
I was thinking that. That's great. I love that. But people look at me funny. I'm like, oh no, I did my time. I go, I did 12 years. They're like, really? I go, yeah. First through 12th grade, man. Absolutely. Catholic school. Yeah. So West Side suburbs of Aurora. So yeah. Sorry, go on.
So at what point did you find improv then? So you lived your life, went through school, mm-hmm. and then you moved to Chicago, or did you find improv in Aurora?
I found improv somewhere in between, and I think like Glen Ellen. So what happened was, I've always wanted to do stand-up. So as after I graduated from high school, I go to the University of Illinois down in Champaign-Urbana, and so again, it was continue the education. But then, just whether it's education-wise or funny-wise, when you go from school of 550 kids total, 114 or whatever in your class, to a school that has, 50,000 or, how many ever students there were. It's like, you're no longer the funniest guy in your class. You're no longer the smartest person. Not that I was even so remotely the smartest person in my class, but, so you're no longer a big fish in a little pond. You're just like, oh my God, even as I wrestled in high school, and it was like, I can't even compete with these guys, these farmers boys that grew up wrestling since they were 2, like, I'm like, I guess just use me as a rag doll and you can practice on me. I'm never going to get on the team, things like, so you're no longer this big fish that you were. Not that I was that in high school. I probably wasn't. My mind is deceiving me. And so I just, did school. And then once I got out.
What were you going to school for?
It started, good question. I started out in engineering. And then I basically talked my way into the dorms, which all the freshmen, there was like a housing shortage. So the people were even put in like the armory, like in barracks almost. So the thing was, my friends from Taekwondo, Henry and Carl Chin, they were already, one was a junior and one was a senior. And Henry, the senior, his roommate was going to become an RA for the dorms. And there were juniors and seniors still living in the dorms. So I think they were part of the problem why freshmen couldn't get into the dorms. So basically he requested me, I requested him when his roommate decided to become our RA. So somehow as a freshman, I ended up in this sweet dorm. And people were like, how did Vato get into this dorm? Like, we're living in the armory and here he is like in the best dorm. I was like, I figured it out. And so yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question?
What you initially went to school for, but you said engineering. Oh, so you were there to be an engineer.
Yes. Because he, and again, not to stereotype, and please cut this out, Asian. So of course, they wanted to work at Motorola and whatnot, but brilliant. They were geniuses. And, also the children of immigrants, their parents own a hand laundry, which is true. A Chinese hand laundry, Chin's Hand Laundry in Aurora. And we weren't bad kids, but let's just say that when they went off to school, the father was able to buy a Cadillac in cash because he didn't have 2 kids running into the register, like grabbing 20 here, 20 there. So, so Henry and Carl were engineers. And there was another friend named Carl. He was an engineer. And like Henry was electrical. Carl was mechanical. The other Carl was ceramic engineering, which I'd never even heard of. So I'm like, yeah, I want to do what they're doing, But after seeing the stuff that Henry was doing, the math problems, I'm like, no. So then I just got into like the business, the liberal arts college. But, because I think I tried the business school as well. That didn't fare too well. But then when I got out of college, I ended up going into business for myself after I worked for a business broker.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of a roundabout way of getting to the business degree. But at some point, exactly. amongst all that education, you got bit by the bug. So go ahead and fill us in on that.
God, I'm going to kind of age myself here. But so then I decide, I still remember, so I started working for a business brokerage firm. And back then it was kind of like the Wild West where there were no really regulations. To sell real estate, of course, you needed a real estate license. To sell a business, you didn't. But now we had real estate licenses in case the business was sold with the property, but that was rarely the case. Most businesses, just like today, rent a space in a strip mall or wherever they are. So we mostly sold like small to medium sized businesses like gas stations, convenience stores, things like that. So I just walked into this Oberweis Dairy of Geneva, and anyone from Illinois will be like, oh my God, Oberweis ice cream.
I know what an Oberweis is. It's delicious.
It's so delicious that when I bought the place, I weighed 200 pounds. 7 years later, when I sold it, I was 300 pounds. So yeah, it's delicious. It's better than any ice cream that's out there. Anything, Haagen-Dazs, Ben & Jerry's, whatever you think is good, this is like 20% butterfat, and again, growing up Latino, I didn't learn anything about health, obviously, or eating right, or, it's like, I think, when your parents are growing up poor, and then now that they have not a lot of money, but now they have some money, they're not going to let their kids starve, so they're going to, I had meat with every meal and giant breakfast of eggs and bacon and
Midwestern.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Very Midwestern. I mean, so much so that like in kindergarten, not to go, to go back, but they had us fill out like a paper that said, what did you have for breakfast today? And then all the other kids are like, oh, I had toast and orange juice. And I've circled eggs. I circled bacon because it was on there. And it was true. My mom she would make a full breakfast every morning. And I circled, I think I even wrote in like beans. I probably spelled it Benz. I don't know. Rice, Benz, tortilla, bread, everything that we really had. So one of the nuns called my mom and she was like, what did Pablo, because that's what now you know my real name. What did Pablo have for breakfast? My mom instantly like, oh my God, is he sick? What happened? They're like, no. So she goes, yeah, I made him eggs, toast, tortillas, beans, bacon, I think we might have had pancakes. And they're like, wait, Maria, you mean you make them breakfast every morning? She's like, oh yeah, every morning before you go. So no wonder I was so fat, of course. So but that's the way, my mom was. So that just kind of led to my unhealthy eating. So this ice cream shop years later, when I finally sold it and moved to LA, I was up to like 300 pounds. So Oberweis Dairy, did that for like 7 years before I moved to LA.
So were you running the ice cream shop? Like you own the building, but then did you also manage
I just owned the business. And
you own the business.
And I wish I would have bought the building, but I didn't know how to do it. And it was only like, even at the time it was a lot of money. It was like $200,000, but it was a whole little train station, a cute little train station at Crescent Place, 300 Crescent Place. It's a very antique town called Geneva, Illinois, very Swedish town. Mm-hmm. And so I was in the train station. So I bought the business from a gentleman who owned a couple of Dairy Queens and a yogurt shop in Batavia, Illinois. But this was gourmet ice cream and coffee. This was just gourmet ice cream. I added the coffee later. So we sold a milkshake for $5, which was unheard of at that time. It was before Pulp Fiction came out. So, that $5 milkshake scene, I was like, oh, and then now I go somewhere and it's like, oh, that'll be $8. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I should have just stayed in the ice cream business. But at the time, the most expensive shakes were, McDonald's for 80 cents, or even a gourmet place was sold them for $1, whatever, $1.25.
So this is right on the Amtrak line, right? I think I know roughly where your business.
Yeah, it was the UP. It was the Union Pacific line, but it was one of the lines, Metro from Chicago, that went through like West Chicago, Glen Ellen, and into Chicago, into Union Station.
Yeah, so like if you were doing St. Louis to Chicago, you would hit those towns.
Yes.
Yep. Yes. Then I've definitely rolled through that train station where your business was.
So yes, so we may have met, but I probably would have given you complimentary ice cream. So I wasn't the best businessman, because ladies, who want some ice cream? Like, hey, you use what God gave you, I guess.
Not everybody's got ice cream for a lure. So
yes.
I mean, ice cream is an excellent lure, guys. It's delicious. Especially, David, you've never had Oberweis, but like there was one in Jefferson City, Missouri, whenever I was growing up, and it is by far the best ice cream I've ever had in my life.
I like how Whitney makes all these assumptions about me all the time.
Have you ever had Oberweis?
Yeah, I travel a ton, Whitney.
All right. It's good.
I
is it
love
not?
ice cream. Yes, excellent. It's excellent.
It is fantastic. Milk in glass bottles. The eggnog. You know what? I don't think I'd ever even had eggnog. And when it came in glass bottles, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever had, where I would chug like pints of it, not realizing that, hey, you just ate a full like day's worth of calories in that in that delicious glass mug.
It's a calorie shot.
Yes, yeah, because I would a quart. I was probably is it a quart or a pint? What was I drinking? Probably a quart of it,
Whoa.
And throughout the day, I'm not a pig, because, I just spread it out throughout the day. So then I'd make like eggnog cappuccinos. Oh, because that's the other thing. I added gourmet coffee, because they used to sell, coffee for 50 cents a cup, and it was just regular coffee out of a drip. And I was like, there's this new thing called espresso. I probably called it espresso. There's this new thing called espresso. So I went and I bought a machine, a industrial strength espresso machine, and added that. And it was just as Starbucks was starting to make an appearance. So it wasn't, but then that really helped, because, we were open year round, and in the winter, believe it or not, people do eat ice cream in the winter because it doesn't melt as fast. And once you're inside, it's warm, whatever.
And it tastes good. It tastes good. I just want the taste. It's not about it being cold.
Yes. Yeah. It's delicious. But there were less people, out and about but people still had to go to work. So we, instead of selling 50-cent cups of coffee, and we had a group of like very old men at the time. And I was like, there's no way I can raise the price, because they're all like war veterans, and they'd meet religiously every morning at, like 7 or 8 in the morning, because, old people get up early, and they brag about it. And you're like, well, of course you got up early. You went to sleep at 7 p.m. last night. Yeah, I did up early. I went to sleep at 7. And so I kind of just outlasted them, and I never raised the price on them. I definitely raised the price for the coffee, and then definitely sold, the cappuccinos, espressos for probably like $1.50, $2. But for them, I never raised it, because I figured they're going to be gone soon anyways. And sure enough, after, the group dwindled to 4, then 3, then 2, and then it was very sad. But then I was like, okay, now we raise the prices, now that these guys are no longer with us.
That's super kind of you, though. Like,
it was. I think it was.
Yeah, it's thoughtful.
I would have rather have left the price if they were still alive. I would have still probably been charging 50 cents a cup.
So how'd you go from slinging ice cream scoops to doing what you're doing now?
Well, so I had Geneva Dairy, or Oberweis Dairy of Geneva. It was at the train station, and the cigar boom took off. So I got into cigars. And so I would drive to Naperville or wherever the local cigar shop was. And, I would buy better cigars. So even then, I'd spend like $100 and maybe get 8 cigars. But the thing was, it was the drive. I would waste so much time going, to a cigar shop, that I was like, well, I have a business license. And it was right before the boom hit. So I set up accounts basically just so I could buy them at wholesale so I could smoke them. But then one thing led to another. I had a woman that came in that owned the local liquor store, and she'd come in to pick up her milk in glass bottles. So I just, asked her, I was like, hey, if I start selling cigars, would you put them in your liquor store? She was like, we can try it. She goes, I don't know if they'll sell. Like no one's really asking for them. So through my coffee connection, Papa Nicholas and Sons Coffee, who's slightly Greek, Nicholas A. Papa Nicholas, and he became he was kind of like a mentor to me. Great man, passed away at like 69. But he was a wonderful man who ended up being my mentor. And they hooked me up with the people that made their plastic, their acrylic displays. So I basically started selling cigars as part of the ice cream. And then after about 4 or 5 years, I then finally found the time to go into the city as part of me driving around and distributing cigars while still owning the ice cream shop. I started taking comedy classes. And it was because, I still wanted to do stand-up. That's all I wanted to do. But when I bought this, I was like, what's the better choice? Move to Chicago and try to start doing stand-up, or do I, buy this ice cream shop? And I just felt like that was the better business decision. And maybe, I guess it was, years later, then I finally was able to go into Chicago, and I went to Improv Olympic by mistake. Cause there was, the internet wasn't what it was today. You don't just Google improv and then you're like, oh, Improv Olympics, second city. No, it was a process. So I went to Improv Olympic to try to learn how to do stand-up. And I was promptly told, well, we don't do stand-up here. We do improvisational comedy. And I was like, well, I've already paid you. I've already given you a check, because back then we would pay with checks. So just teach me what you teach, and then I'll go from there. So I was already older when I got into it. And then I went to this show called the Armando Diaz Theatrical Experience in Hootenanny, which is a monologist, and then you kind of do improv stories based around his stories. And I was blown away by it. I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is amazing. And at the time, I think like Rachel Dratch was still there. I think Tina Fey had just left, but they were still coming back to Chicago all the time. But they had just kind of moved to New York to start Upright Citizens Brigade. Amy Poehler, Matt Besser, those guys. But Kevin Dorff was there, who then, like soon after that, went off to write for Conan. And Andy Richter had just left, so he was kind of on his way to Conan as well. Chris Farley he was already famous. He'd already been on Saturday Night Live, and eventually, I got to meet him, and I hung out with him like that Monday right before he passed away. So yeah, I went into Improv Olympic and started studying improvisational comedy, and then Second City, and then a little bit of Annoyance Theater. So that was really my first intro into theater. So kudos to those of you that studied theater and have a degree in theater and like took it serious. I just came from an improv background and kind of, I guess, learned through osmosis proper, staging techniques and stage presence and what exit stage right or stage left means, simple things like that I didn't know. So that's in a long answer. That's how I kind of got into the improv world, and then started my own Latino improv group.
Gotcha. What do you think it is about Chicago that inspires so much like incredible improv talent to come from? Like, why do they all end up in Chicago?
Well, location. Same with like cigars in Cuba. Who started it first? Chicago. Because that was where like the committee, I think, which was in San Francisco, but then they came out to Chicago at the University of Chicago. So it was, like Del Close and that whole group. So I think it was just, had they gone to St. Louis, and St. Louis has a great improv scene with there's a guy named Bill Cott, Whitney. I don't know if you know Bill Cott.
No, not particularly familiar.
Yeah, great improv teacher, but they all ended up. So they went out to seek Chicago, but had Del Close and Sharna been somewhere else, that would have probably been the mecca of improv. But just because of the University of Chicago, maybe the time, the 60s, where the ideas that were floating around at the time, and this. So I feel like improv it's an American-born institution, an art form, kind of like jazz or like blues. But it's the same thing, New Orleans is known for a certain style of music. But I think it's just because all the people that kind of started this long form improvisational style were in Chicago. So of course, then people just started going there to study. And to this day, that kind of remains the case. But the great thing now with the internet and being able to study online is you can study with any of these people. And they've taught people that are now all over the world. So you will find brilliant teachers in Singapore that teach Chicago-style improv. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's why Chicago is such a institution when it comes to improvisational comedy. My heart breaks because it's like, oh my God, this was in my backyard the whole time. And, I love it when I meet someone and they're in their early 20s or in their teens, and they've already studied at Second City because they went through their, summer program when they were in high school or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, I wasted, 5 years owning this business where I should have started there. Instead of owning this business, I should have gone into Chicago. But then I may have never even found it. I may have just gotten into stand-up.
Well, and for that matter, Paul, I'm sure that experientially owning that business, that gives you material. That gives you like the life, to bring to the improv. So yeah, you find it when you're supposed to.
Actually, it allowed me then to go into Chicago and drive into Chicago. And also my mom started helping me. She started working with me. I don't like to say people worked for me. And, but she was instrumental in picking up a lot of hours. And she, she'd work for an office supply company, but she never worked a day. She never got paid for her work when she was, raising 2 kids, being a mother 24/7. But then after we graduated, and kind of were no longer, once we turned 18 or, even then, we were always welcome to be at home and stay at home. Then she finally went out and got back into the workforce. So then she offered to help me, and so she would help me. So if it wasn't for her, there's no way I would have been able to make it, because our shop was open from like 6 a.m. Until 10 p.m., midnight sometimes on the weekends. So she helped out a lot, and I was actually able to drive into Chicago to study improv and to do shows, and then put together the first, which I think is the first Latino improv and sketch comedy group by the name of Salsation. And we did a hit show called Touched by an Anglo, which found some pretty good success in Chicago, and then eventually moved to LA, formed Barrio Speedwagon. Also did Touched by an Anglo with only three to four performers. And then that's how we wound up in LA.
Oh, okay. So I know that you've talked a little bit about this on Clubhouse and stuff, but I didn't realize that the show is what brought you to LA.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know what? I'm trying to think, because I remember I got hired. We were supposed to, it was like 2000, I think, that we're supposed to move out. So What About Joan? The Joan Cusack show. I got cast on that. It was the only sitcom shooting in Chicago, because she lived there with her attorney husband, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so she lived in Chicago. So she wanted to do the show, but only in Chicago. So a lot of us improvisers finally, got to be on the show, but it was canceled after one season. And I feel like I taped a few episodes, but then they were for the next season, so they never aired. I don't even know if the episode I taped, it must have aired at the end of season one, and then it just didn't come back. So I kind of hung out in Chicago just to finish that, and then flew out to LA. But yeah, basically we had this hit show in Chicago called Touched by an Anglo that we did at the Second City, but at Donnie's Skybox. So it wasn't like the main stage. I always like to preface it because I know that some people say like, oh yeah, I performed at Second City, and I could kind of leave it at that. But then other, I've met casting directors are like, well, no, you should just say that. Like, I don't know, I want, full disclosure. We performed at Second City, but at like Donnie's Skybox. So it was the more experimental theater that they had to like your work, and then they would let you rent it. Maybe I feel like we did rent it. So we would do shows on, I think, Fridays and Saturdays, and it was just going to be like a 1 month run, and which turned into like a 6 month run, because it was new. It was refreshing. It was something that especially the Latino community had never been exposed to. We added a third date, like on a Thursday in Pilsen, which is a very Latino neighborhood in Chicago. And a buddy of mine in the documentary, the Salsation documentary that they did on YouTube, said something pretty philosophical. He goes, we started this show. It wasn't even theater season, he says. He goes, it wasn't even theater season. He goes, but Latinos don't know what theater season is. So our show in Pilsen also took off. So we brought to a whole group of people that had never been exposed to it. And it was specifically improvisational comedy. And I feel like even to this day that there's a few people that came out of, audience members that ended up getting into improv. So we exposed a lot of people through this show. And then that's when half the group, three of us, who was it? Diane Herrera, Joe Nunez, and myself, we're like, well, let's go to LA. Let's give LA a shot and do the same thing. Let's go out to LA. Let's do the show for a month, at Improv Olympic, because they were already out there. Let's do the show. And then we'll come back to Chicago. Big deal, So, but I kind of took it a step further. I sold everything. I sold my business. I sold everything. And I was like, all right, let's go. So I guess in a way I knew that I wasn't coming back. But the plan was to go to LA, do the show, and then come back to Chicago and work on another show. So we told our Salsation, we're going, but we'll be back. And they're like, okay, but you can't use the name Salsation. That's why from now on, I will never, it's not a democracy. It's a dictatorship, maybe, because like I started the damn group, me and Tilda Del Toro, and now you guys have kind of hijacked it. We're like, all right, well, like most improvisers, we'll figure it out. So that's how we came up with Barrio Speedwagon for the name that we then, which I think was funnier and people loved it. They'd laugh at Barrio Speedwagon. They'd laugh at Touched by an Anglo. So that's how we wound up with getting management and an agents, in LA. And then once we had an agent and a manager, because the show ended up running, I think, for like 3 or 6 months. I don't even remember now.
I was going to ask how it was received. Clearly pretty well if you guys had a long run like that.
Because the show was, not to, I guess, toot our own horn, the show was pretty perfect in that, if you were a connoisseur of sketch and improv, you're like, wow, that was very well done. And we had it down to a science. It was tight. So the show was tight. The show was funny, but it worked on all different levels. And I think it was part of the fact that I want to credit myself and Tilda for like, hey, here's this guy who's half Amr, who's half Pakistani and half Colombian, but he's in the group. Here's Sandra Chavez from Texas, from the border in Texas. She's probably Republican. She's perfect, but realistically, that's all the Latinos that were around. So we didn't really have a choice. So it just so happened that the Latinos, and Eva Rios, she's Puerto Rican and she's loud, and that's just being a stereotype. She was loud and had a cackle for a laugh. She's perfect in the group. These were the only Latinos that were around. The only other one was Armando Diaz and Horatio Sands. And Horatio was already on Second City's ETC stage. He was ready to go to New York, really, for Saturday Night Live. So it's not like he's going to be like, oh, yeah, I'd love to. And it wasn't, because, he's Chilean, so he counts, but he's not going to step away from Second City to help. To be in our group. He helped us, and he always, I think, championed our cause. And I think we called him like the godfather of Salsation. We gave him that honorary title and everybody helped us. Everybody was very welcoming. But the show just worked because even people that didn't barely speak English, so especially like in Pilsen, if we had immigrants that would come and didn't speak English, they were still laughing. And I would watch this because some of it was a little physical. Some of it was pretty heady, like Cooking with Frida, which was like Cooking with Frida Kahlo. And she was so mad at Diego that basically she was chopping up his penis, but she was chopping peppers. So it was, and you could tell that she was mad at Diego from this cooking show. And Ramon did a beautiful monologue on being a jibaro, which is like a farmer in Puerto Rico, and the kids teaching him about the internet, so he was able to build a fence. So it was like little palate cleansers, and we had blackouts, just like a Second City show. So we took a lot of influence from Second City because they do it right, sketches, blackouts, and our musical closing number. We were the Wetback Street Boys, so we were. Which I don't know if I'm going to have some non-Latino getting mad at me going like, you can't say wetback, so it was either that or En Cinco. So we went with the Wetback. Our song was Ode to the Hoochie Mama. And we were all stereotypes. I was the prisoner with handcuffs and a jumpsuit, and Amr was the Rico Suave type guy. And we had Ramon was a waiter, and then I remember we had, Diane played maybe Diane was Rico Suave. We also had like a landscaper. So like all the stereotypes. We had one sketch with Mexican Barbie. So it was Mexican Barbie and Mexican. And what else? We had a cereal commercial called Latin O's, like Cheerios, but Latin O's. So yeah, I don't know. The show just worked. And I know that it worked because we would invite everybody out for drinks afterwards. My friend Brian Bondurant, who just got to Chicago or to Vegas today, or I'm supposed to go meet him in a little bit. He ran bars right by Second City. So he would comp a drink to anyone that came into our show in a way to get business over there. And we would bring, half the audience would follow us, where all the other groups were like, how do you get all these people to come and hang out with you guys? I'm like, well, we offer them a free drink. So they would, and people would take me aside and go, you know what, your show's perfect, except I don't really like that guy Amr, or whatever. Be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll look into it. And then another person would come. They never say that they didn't like me because, they're talking to me. I'm sure if they were talking to Amr, they'd be like, you got to get rid of Paul. So I like the fact that people were like, I don't like this person. I don't like that person. This person is great. But everyone in the group, somebody always said that they were great. So there was always somebody that was great in the group for that individual consumer.
So you hit all of your demographics is what you're saying, and you think that's why it really worked?
I think so. Because it was intellectually, I felt like it was funny. It was commentary on society because we did one sketch, long sketch or recurring sketch was Who Wants to Be an American Citizen? And again, these were topical because Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on at the time. So, the more questions you answered, the more from a green card to from a work permit to a green card to full on citizenship. And of course the Indian guy won because they're so smart, So, I think, but yes, so it hit everyone. And I know that you don't create art to appeal to everybody, but but I feel like because we had different voices, male, female, Mexican American, Puerto Rican American. No kidding. I know that Puerto Rico is an American. Colombian, half Pakistani, Chicana from Texas, but maybe identified right wing. So I was a business owner, so I'd rather not discuss my politics. But so it just, I feel like it just worked. And then Diane Herrera, she was a writer, but then became a really, really, really good improviser, sketch artist as well. Sean, I remember a guy who eventually joined us. He was, Cuban American. Paula Lopez. I mean, just I think even Amy Garcia, who's now like super famous. I think because I've tried following her and she didn't follow me back, and she has like 1 million followers on Twitter. Amy with 2 E's. I've in our group for a little bit. So we found like gems, but again, it also came down to that's all that was in Chicago at the time. It wasn't like there was this big pool of me being brilliant, going like this person, that. It just worked because that's all who was in Chicago. Latinos that were doing improv in a predominantly white, male-dominated profession, if you want to call it a profession.
So a vast majority of this group you guys took with you to LA, and then did anyone else in the group stay, or you stayed in LA, right?
So I think at the time we probably had 7 members when we were in Chicago. And then, so I think that's why they won, because it was 4 against 3. Only 3 of us came to LA. So half the group, really, less than half. But I feel like the reason we couldn't use Salsation was because 4 stayed, and they're like, no, we're Salsation, and since we're not going, you can't use the name. And maybe I'm being overly dramatic here, but I just remember that they didn't want us to use Salsation because Salsation was Chicago, not LA. So we're like, okay. So only 3 of us went, and the 3 of us stayed. And we're still basically in LA. I'm in Vegas, but I'm still in LA. And then Ava Rios, who played Judge Booty in one of our sketches because she had a big ass, Judge Judy, but with a big ass. She came out and joined. And then, so of course, anyone that came out from Salsation was welcome to join us in LA. So I know she came out, and I feel like a few other people. Josie Dicus, who was Mexican and Polish, I believe. And I'm only saying that just to show you the variety of people that we had in our group. Then Josie, I believe. And Rasika Mathur was part of Salsation, and she's Indian, but it was as close as we could get. We're like, wow, she's brown. No one else is going to know. Fuck it. So, let's bring Rasika in. And she's still in LA, I believe. So yeah, we anyone that wanted to. So, but I believe it was really just Joe, Diane Herrera, Joe Nunez. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Ava came out. Oh, and then Sandra Chavez also. And then unfortunately, though, she's since passed away. Not too long ago. So Sandra Chavez, and she used to work in Wisconsin for like Harley Davidson, and maybe had done theater in high school. I don't remember, but she was an integral part of our group because she kind of brought that Texas, more right wing aspect to it. And I hope I'm, I could be wrong, but and myself. So eventually maybe we grew it to 5 people in LA, but yeah, we ended up staying in LA because we were like, well, we have representation. We have a manager, a friend of us, Frank Payne, who has also passed away. So I guess stay away from me. Frank Payne, who's a really big man with a big heart and was on a show called Big, or, he did like construction equipment stories and with all big equipment. So he offered to be our manager, and he formed, I go, you're just jumping on the bandwagon. So he goes, yeah, I am. He goes, Bandwagon Entertainment it is. So he formed that, and he managed us. So he managed us. And we ended up getting, I think we each got different agents, because different agents, we'd invite agents to come out and see us. And Susan Nathan Associates, I was across the board with her. So we were like, well, why? We can't give this up. Like, it takes months or years sometimes to get representation. And here we are, 2 or 3 months into our run. And then I booked a Del Taco commercial campaign for like 6 or 7 commercials in Spanish.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, this is easy. I'm like, what are people complaining about? Are you kidding me? 3 months and I've got this campaign. I've got an agent. I've got a manager. Like, this is, what are people complaining about? And then, of course, life really kicks you. And then, so that's why I'm like, yeah, well, I guess I'll just sell cigars to support my acting habit. So that kind of worked out. And, but then I got like Bold and the Beautiful. So I was on that for a couple months. So it's just every year something happened that it just got further away from our mind. Like, why would we go back to Chicago? We'll go back to visit. And we went back often, but we can't move back to Chicago because the plan was to do the show for a month, go back to Chicago, write another show, and then move, and then eventually end up in LA. But we had a talk. We're like, well, let's just stay and do it. I think that show might have run for like 6 months in LA. And again, it's so long ago now, I don't even remember.
But it sounds like when you got to LA, the wild kind of opening of the gates of opportunities kind of presented itself to you right away. So it helped kind of inform that decision not to go back.
100%. 100%. Because it was like we would be taking a step back. As much as we love Chicago and miss it, we're going to take a step back and then give up, tell our agents like, hey, thanks for representing us for a month. We're heading, or 4 months, like, thanks for nothing, So no, it's so impossible to get representation. Even then it was so hard. It was even harder then because, they'd have to come out to your show. You'd have to charm them and all that. And then, show them your work. We didn't even have any work. All we had was our live show. We didn't have TV appearances, so.
Yeah, once you got the ball rolling down the hill, you don't want to pick it up and carry it back to the top of the hill and start over, right? Like,
no.
Let the speed keep going.
Exactly.
So then what brought you out to Vegas? Because Vegas is where you are now.
Correct. So cut to 9 years later, and there's a writer's strike going on. So I'm not getting any work. I've since gotten married, I guess. Yeah, right. So, so there's no work. I mean, it kind of dried up. And in the meantime, I'd met Terry Cottle, who owns Binion's Casino. He owns Binion's and Four Queens. So I started hanging out at this restaurant called Velvet Margarita Cantina in Hollywood, 1612 North Cahuenga, where they have a delicious drink named the Velvet Vato. Guess that's how much I hung out there. So much so that when we got an apartment in Hollywood, it was like walking distance to Velvet Margarita Cantina. And that's when I was like, maybe there's a little bit of a problem here. But if you're at Velvet, order the Velvet Vato. It's a delicious, originally it was a delicious frozen mango margarita. What did I used to say? It's delicious, just like me. Goes down easy and slightly fruity.
I'm definitely going to have to try that.
Calm down. And last I checked, all of their flavored margaritas are now a Velvet Vato. So whether it's strawberry or any of their frozen margaritas are considered, except for the house one, are considered the Velvet Vato. So it's still there. So Cinco de Mayo is their anniversary. And at the time, they were probably celebrating their 3rd or 4th anniversary or 5th anniversary. And I met, so Big Daddy Carlos, the owner, said, hey, you need to be here and bring your cigars. So when I partnered up with him, I would sell cigars to whenever they had a rap party. So like, who was there? LL Cool J, whatever show he was doing, Four Weddings. What was it? No, it wasn't Four Weddings and a Funeral. What am I thinking of? There was some Vince Vaughn movie with Robert Duvall. Like, I just remember meeting, all these people. And Vince Vaughn, I kind of knew because from Chicago, but I really met him in LA. I think he probably thought I was Horatio Sanz because I walked up to a table that he was sitting at and he stood up to like shake my hand. And I was like, I'm Horatio. I don't know. Whatever. I'll but then we became, acquaintances. So yeah, I met Terry, and he needed somebody to sell him cigars, and yeah, I guess the rest is history. And there was a writer strike. I auditioned for a Hanes T-shirt commercial when they came out with the tagless Hanes, and it was with Michael Jordan. So I'm like, oh my God, like if I can get this commercial, I mean, that would be fantastic. Like, oh my God, Michael Jordan, and then of course didn't hear back. And then when it airs, who gets it? Charlie Sheen. And that was kind of like the nail in the coffin. I was like, what? I'm like, what's Charlie doing commercials for? Like, he's a TV star. So basically all the movie stars started doing TV. All the TV stars started doing commercials. At least that's, again, and maybe it's the stories that I make up in my mind. I'm like, what kind of work is left for us? And again, it was like 2009. There was a writer's strike. Met Terry. He needed somebody to sell him cigars. And I was like, well, it's only Vegas. It's only 3.5 hours away. And then it was the bottom of the housing market. So realistically, by that time we had a boat in Marina del Rey that we were living on. So it was pretty nice. But then we were able to buy a house for, prices that our parents would have paid for a house.
Right.
So it was just the right time. And at least it was an investment too, So yeah, we moved to Vegas, and yeah, that's what brought me to Vegas. And then, I was just wholesaling cigars to Terry at Four Queens and at Binion's, to their gift shops, to their cigar lounge. And then before we even opened, they closed down the hotel because of the economy. So the hotel had been closed. It closed in 2009. So the front desk area was available. And I don't know, Terry asked if I wanted to open up a little store, or maybe I asked him. We were probably drinking, and I thought it was a good idea at the time. And so we opened a little store in the casino in May 28th, 2010. So then, yeah, we were in that place temporarily for 9 years until the hotel reopened like a couple years ago. And then they built another location for us. So awesome. Yeah, that's how I wound up in Vegas. And in the meantime, I didn't really do anything in LA, but I did do with Jacob Vargas, and is it Faison? Is that his name? We did a TV movie. I was in a TV movie that filmed at the Plaza, which confused a lot of people because the Plaza is, steps away from Binion's. So I was dressed like a bellhop because that was my role. And I read, like, I think it was the manager of the Plaza, and he kind of looked at me. He's like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you working here? And I go, I'm in a movie. And he goes, oh, you're an actor? I'm like, yeah, I'm an actor as well. He was like, what the hell's the cigar guy taking like a second job as a bellhop for? Like, what's going on? So
you must have been very convincing then.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? I took it as a compliment. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. He really thinks I'm a bellhop. That's great. No role is too small for Paul.
So you're living it up in Vegas. You own the cigar business. I feel like we're kind of up to like the nowish days.
Yeah.
Working as an actor. Are you still doing improv out in Vegas?
No, because there are. I know there's a young lady, Amy Piddle, who's in the improv world. I did one big event, which I'd like to bring back. And so if anyone's listening that wants to partner up or help me with this, it's called, I did Hit the Improv Jackpot. And this was in like March of 2000. Was it 2010 or 11 or 12? I don't know. It was Hit the Improv Jackpot, where I brought out Mo Collins, who I knew from Mad TV, from when I did Mad TV, and who else? Drew Droege, who's a brilliant improviser, and Rich Tellerico, who's been a writer for Saturday Night Live and Mad TV, and he and I were pretty good friends, to teach this improv workshop. So we had people from all over, mostly from LA, but people flew in, and I put together this package with the Four Queens where they could stay there, and then we performed there. They took their classes there, and then we did a show on Sunday night. So this is something that I'd like to bring back virtually, though. I'd like to Hit the Improv Jackpot too. But now I feel like it would be easier to just bring in instructors from all over the place and students from all over the world as well. So that's what I did kind of in improv. I've never really had to, because I think as I was working a lot, so I never even had the chance to really like drop into like improv classes or improv shows. I was saying this Amy Piddle, I believe she, at least for a while there, was running like the improv jam, some kind of improv jam out here. But unfortunately, no. I did that TV show. I feel like I did a couple of commercials. I did a movie with Nicolas Cage called The Trust. I had a small part in, and then I just did the Uber Eats commercial that came out in the Super Bowl, which I'm not into that version, but I'm
But you were there on the day.
I was there, and you can see what I call a commercial film on YouTube, because it's a 2.5 hour commercial, because they thank every single person that's on the Uber Eats platform.
Oh wow!
On the screen, it's scrolling, and so I'm in that long version, of course, but yes, again, a casting director said, well, you should call it a Super Bowl commercial because you filmed it, right? I was like, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Paul, one of my go-to questions that I ask almost everyone who comes on this podcast is...
Here it comes, Paul.
Here it comes. What is your dream project? Like, what is the one thing that you haven't done yet that you're like, yes, I want to do this, and that would just make my day? Well, I always ask this because I feel like if you put it out into the universe, shout it loud and proud, it's going to come back around. And it has happened so many times on this podcast that people do. And within months, they're calling us back and they're like, hey, you know that thing that I wanted to do? I'm getting to do it. So what is your dream project?
Well, the first one that pops into my mind, because I have several, but and it's probably like, a dream project would be to have my own show, whether I'm actually acting in it or just, writing my story, which was initially I Love Vato, or I Love the Vatos, kind of like a modern day Ricky and Lucy meets like Rehab and LA Inc., I guess, because, we meet so many interesting people, and alcohol is kind of like a lubricant. So we get all these people talking to us or at us sometimes in Vegas. The thing is, we probably have to change it from the world of tobacco into something else, because nobody wants to touch a show, that has tobacco in it, but that would be it. Or I don't know if there's an or option, but I love biographies, and there's a lot of interesting people that I would like to produce a biography based on their lives. One of them being like a musician, but also there's so many great stories out there. But I really would love to have my own show, a comedic show, something like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where it's improvised with my genius improv friends. I'm a big fan of The Office, which I know was not improvised, but felt improvised. So a combination of The Office and Curb Your Enthusiasm, but with me in it.
Those are great. That's a awesome list of dream productions. I hope that you get to do that. I love the one that you said is like modern day Lucy. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yes, especially it's set in Vegas, and it's more like I'm the Lucy character because I'm always scheming.
Yeah.
Wow, you agreed with that awfully fast.
He's called you out twice now, Whitney.
All right, here we go. I'm going to agree with that. It's clear that you are always hustling, and I respect that because I'm always hustling too. David can tell you, like, I'm always trying to find angles. So I think it's a wonderful trait, Paul. I was not judging that.
Thank you. Or as they say in England, thank you with an F. Thank you.
So we're about at the end of the podcast, and just to kind of wrap it up, how can people contact you? You want to tell us a little pitch on your podcast that you have? Whatever you want to just get out there so people can find you.
Perfect. This should only take about half an hour, and then I'll let you guys go. I introduce myself that way on Clubhouse sometimes in a British group, because somebody was mentioning that the Brits kind of have it tough, like they don't really like talking about themselves. So I was like, well, I'm American. You can probably tell by the accent, and but don't worry, I'll be quick. This should only take like 15 minutes. So that usually gets a laugh in the UK groups. So Paul Vato across all pretty much all social media. The easiest would be to go to paulvato.com. And that is my Popple profile, which I am a brand ambassador for. I feel it's like a bio link where I'll say it. I don't think Linktree is ever going to hire me. But you know what? I'm not going to say it. It's a better bio link. Let's just say that, where you can put all your links in one place. So I just pointed my Paul Vato domain to that, where you can find my headshots. You can find my acting resume. I am looking for theatrical representation and management. If anyone is listening that's in that world or knows somebody that's looking for my type. Yes. So Paul Vato. And then the podcast that's going to drop soon is called Just Saying. And I'm sure I'll put a link there on the profile. So by the time this airs, hopefully you can find it by going to paulvato.com. And it's with my co-host, or maybe I'm his co-host, is Snappy Bigman Coffee and Christopher Manzo, who kind of had a parallel life. He's from St. Louis, I believe. He's in the St. Louis area. Also strong improviser. Was a cigar rep for a large cigar company, and now owns his own coffee company. So we've kind of had this parallel, yes and career. So we get along wonderfully. And he just sent me the second episode a few hours ago. I don't think it's done being edited. So we're just looking, where to host it. So we're going to that route. So Just Saying. And then I guess my podcast, I think it's going to be an extension of Clubhouse. So I'm going to use Clubhouse to record interviews. So my first big interview, which should be out when this airs, is with Maz Jobrani, who's an Iranian-American stand-up comedian, and he's been around for a long time. But he's not just a comedian, of course. He has his back-to-school podcast, so I'm sure we'll promote his podcast. And, I want to learn about his life. And that's what my podcast is going to be about, the one I'm pretty much doing on my own. It's, Celebrity Club on Clubhouse. But I'm interviewing people from all walks of life that are a celebrity, if you will, in their particular industry. And was there another question?
No, I think you covered everything. So thank you so much for coming on, Paul. This was awesome. I loved hearing about your story and how you got to where you are, and in the funniest possible way.
I feel like I spoke way too much. So thank you for it's almost cathartic. Like, wow, I've done a lot. I forget how much I've done. So, well,
remember the thing we talked about at the beginning of the episode, people are always like, I don't know, I got enough to talk about. And then they're like, man, I had a lot to talk about.
Exactly. So thank you for giving me this platform. And this is wonderful. I've listened to some of your other shows, and I'm sorry to let you down that I'm not like in Star Wars or anything cool like that, David, but,
no, the thing is we just like talking to creatives, and we're all at different journeys, and we're all at different places on those journeys. And we just like touching base with people wherever they're at and whatever it is they're doing. Sometimes they're doing big things. Sometimes they're just starting out. And all of it to me is fascinating and wonderful to discuss and hear and get to just kind of celebrate what we all do and wherever it is we're at within that context. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Paul.
It is my absolute pleasure. I feel a little lost because my finger started twitching like I should hit the applause button. If I hit anything, I think I'll close the meeting. So
Clubhouse is starting to like create weird habits, right?
100% it is. I'm not addicted though. I gotta go though. I gotta go. I gotta go see what's going on in Clubhouse.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And we'll see you probably on the app.
I'll see you in a few minutes on the app, Whitney and David. I'll see you later. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity. It was wonderful, and best of luck with your podcast. And I'll definitely help promote it as best I can.
Yeah, best of luck with yours as well.
Yeah, vice versa. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. Bye audience.
Bye, audience. Love you guys.
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching IntelleXual Podcast with your ears.